downgraded, but the full fury of Rita is becoming apparent.
And in other news, thousands gather in London as the Stop the War coalition calls for an Iraq withdrawal. Tony Blair arrives in Brighton for the start of the Labour Party conference.
Sky News with Jeremy Thompson and Alan King.
Well, Hurricane Rita hit the coast of eastern Texas here in the early hours this morning, bringing with it driving rain, devastating winds, and the threat of huge-scale flooding. The worst seems to be over now. The storm has been downgraded, but an awful lot of damage has been done, and overnight, Texas and Louisiana felt the full force of Hurricane Rita. Sky's Alex Rossi reports now from Houston, Texas.
Rita left her footprint on Texas, but in the end, the monster hurricane predicted never materialized. There is extensive damage, but fate, the vagaries of the weather, and mass evacuation of the Gulf Coast prevented the large-scale loss of life and injury that Katrina brought with her. But New Orleans is suffering again. The deluge of rainwater and high storm surges generated by Hurricane Rita led to new breaches of New Orleans' already battered levees. Once more, the city that has suffered so much in recent weeks is again experiencing flooding. Some small-scale flooding too in southeast Texas, where Rita came ashore. But the predicted massive storm surge and breaching of levees in this part of the coast did not happen. Officials here in Beaumont say it could be anything up to a month before power is fully restored to the city. There's a lot of clearing up to be done, but the watchword appears to be relief. Relief that Rita wasn't far, far worse. Nevertheless, the hurricane ordeal is not over. Rita may stall over the Gulf area and dump a great deal more rainwater across this region. David Bowden, Sky News in Beaumont, Texas.
David Bowden with the very latest there from one of the worst hit areas, Beaumont, just to the east of us, on the more or less on the border with Louisiana, and it is eastern Texas, western Louisiana that has caught the very worst of the storms so far. We're hoping to hear from the mayor of Galveston, right down on the coast where Sky Stewart Ramsey is. That should be happening fairly shortly. And President Bush has already called in his national radio address, his normal Saturday morning address to the people of America, to unite in what he termed difficult times for America in the wake of these two huge storms. Of course, Katrina did massive damage. We know all about that. People are still out assessing just how bad Hurricane Rita is. It seems that it lost power quite rapidly as it hit the coastline around 2:30 this morning. As you can see, the winds are still pretty high, and we are 7 or 8 hours after the main part of the eye of the storm passed by. There's almost lighter skies over towards the coastline just to the south of me here, and the Highway 10, which leads out to Beaumont from Houston, is starting to open up, started to be more traffic, although most of the traffic down Highway 10 has been official traffic. We saw huge convoys of police vehicles about half an hour ago, and we've seen a lot of pickup trucks and 4x4s with official staff trying to take emergency supplies, trying to take meet the needs of the people who've got caught in the eye of the storm around Beaumont. Now let's get an idea about the damage that's been caused and just how the repair operation may start. At the moment, of course, it's all about getting power to people. 1 million people without power in this particular area. The levees in New Orleans, of course, once again breached by the flood waters, the city inundated once again. All these, of course, raising the bill for reparations in the wake of these storms. Dr. Scott Steedmans from the Institute of Civil Engineers joins us now from our London studios. Dr. Steedman, good to talk to you. A huge mop-up operation and a huge repair job lying ahead of the people of Louisiana and Texas and these Gulf states.
Yes, indeed, and these reports that just in of the overtopping of the levees in New Orleans itself is leading to increased flooding. They're trying to repair them as we speak, and I'm sure that they will deal with that as soon as they can.
It's taken about 3 weeks really for them to even start repairing the levees in New Orleans up to the sort of levels they were before Katrina, and we saw how easily they've been breached again by storm surge and by the swollen waters by the rains. I mean, it looks like they're going to have to do a very major job to make New Orleans habitable again, aren't they?
Yes, that's quite true. The breaches that have occurred this time around have occurred on the inner canal in the centre of New Orleans City itself, which was not closed off to Lake Pontchartrain by the sheet piling. So in this way they're going to have to, these are breaches which are caused by overtopping partly through the old breach which occurred in the original storm, and partly on the west side through a new overtopping of one of the old levees. It's simply to do with the storm surge, the rise of water reaching over the top of the levee and then obviously flooding into the areas that have been flooded before. The large sheet piling works which they used to cut off the original breaches are standing perfectly well, and those areas have not been breached.
I was talking to a resident of New Orleans who had already had to evacuate that city and had made his way down to Houston last night. We were weathering the storm together, and he was telling me about how bad New Orleans was. He said he'd heard that as many as 50,000 homes in the lower lying areas may simply have to be bulldozed to make way for new flood-proof housing in the future.
Yes, I think that rather than rebuilding what's there, I think that reconstruction on a large scale will have to take place. The levees themselves that they are patching up, as we see now, using the sandbags and using the rock fill, they will have to do further work on those to provide long-term solutions. And then there will be concerns about the levees on the banks of the Mississippi itself, especially if the rain keeps up at the levels which it is today. So there's a long-term reconstruction activity to take place, which may well involve large-scale land clearance, and maybe this will give the city of New Orleans the opportunity for a new life in the long term. But living below sea level is a very difficult problem for any community. In the Netherlands, the Dutch have had a long experience over hundreds of years of how you build communities that can live below sea level and understand the risks that they're taking. And I think that this is a wake-up call for the US administration in that respect.
I was going to say, until you spend time down around the Gulf Coast, you don't tend to realize just how much is virtually at sea level or below sea level. Most of this Texas coastline where I am now is only a few feet above the sea level. In this day and age, we probably wouldn't even consider building in areas like this, would we, if you were starting all over again as a civil engineer?
Well, low-lying land is very precious, and low-lying land around coastal areas is very heavily inhabited around the world. You'll find many of the major megacities around the world are in very low-lying areas. We can live in these areas. This is not a problem. What we have to do is to decide what level of protection we want to provide to the inhabitants of those areas. And in the Mississippi Valley and the Louisiana coast, they have systems of federal levees, systems of local levees and private interest levees which protect people wherever they choose to live. But the height of those levees, the construction and maintenance of those levees is a decision for the communities to take and for the owners of those levees to take, and they have to live with the risk that involves. So these levee systems in New Orleans, the ones that were breached in the original breach, were fully designed and to their full height. There was no difficulty there. The programs of works that had led to their construction were complete, and they were designed to withstand a 1 in 200 type hurricane occurring in any one year. This turned out to be the event, and they were overtopped. They will in the future perhaps reconsider that. They will have to raise the height of these levees if they wish to have an increased level of protection for the new communities in these very low-lying areas. The engineering behind the levees is relatively straightforward, although of course in these circumstances the sort of emergency works that they're having to undertake can look quite spectacular. They're having to work in very difficult conditions, but the Corps of Engineers who are responsible for this are extremely professional organisation and are very, very experienced worldwide, and indeed they were formed originally to provide the very first federal response to flooding to protect American citizens.
Dr. Scott Steedman, we must leave it there from the Institute of Civil Engineers with a projection of just what needs to be done to make these areas, particularly around New Orleans and these Gulf Coast states right on the sea level, habitable again. Well, President Bush has been out and about today. He's been talking to our colleagues on Fox News and just reminding people in this area, which has been hit by the storm today, that the worst may not be over. So stay safe was the President's message.
The first order of business now is to surge search and rescue teams to pull people out of harm's way. Just had an assessment by General Honore of Lake Charles, Louisiana. It got hit hard. They've got teams on the ground beginning to analyze the situation and prepare the necessary response to stabilize the situation and, more importantly, save lives there as well. It's very important for the citizens who have headed into East Texas to understand that even though the storm has passed the coastline, the situation is still dangerous because of potential flooding. A lot of people have left the coastline and headed into East Texas and parts of western Louisiana. It is important for them to listen carefully to the local authorities about whether or not it is safe to return back to their homes. It's going to take a while for the authorities on the ground to fully understand the impact of the flooding.
President Bush with the latest words of advice for the population of this storm-hit area around the Gulf of Mexico and the Texas and Louisiana coastlines. Well, let's get the latest from David Bowden, who's up in Beaumont, a small town in the middle of the oil industry, right up on the eastern border of Texas. And I think settling down after the night of storms, David.
Well, you say that, Jeremy, and to a large extent you're right. The winds have dropped substantially, but we're in the middle of a torrential downpour again. It's getting very, very wet here, and of course the big fear now that this hurricane will simply sit over this area for hours, maybe days, and just bucket out inches and inches of rainfall, which will fill up all the canyons, the gullies, the creeks here, all the byways, and they will flood. They will stop people getting about their business, and they in themselves will create a second wave of problems. This town now, a hive of activity, emergency service vehicles crissing and crossing all the major roads here, but no people who live here. Most of the people did evacuate when they were asked to do so, and those who did and wanted to come back are being stopped. The authorities here want the cities to themselves to try and sort it out. The power lines need to be back up and running. There's a lot of debris on the roads, lots of fallen trees. As I speak to you, there's a convoy of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fire engines going past. Now, these, I suspect, are some of the first ones off these boats that you may remember. They put a lot of the kit they would need for their emergency services out onto these huge freighters in the Gulf, offshore, out of harm's way. The only problem they've had is that because the waters have risen so much that these ships couldn't get close enough in to put down their back trailers so that they could get these things off until about now. So it's only now that really they're getting out there and gearing up properly to do what they intended to do at first light. Nevertheless, many people here breathing huge sighs of relief that Rita's bark was much worse than her bite.
A lot of sighs of relief further along the west of you in Galveston Island, another very low-lying area of this coastline. Sky Stewart Ramsey's there. Are you still cut off, or have the causeways opened up yet so you can get back onto the main part of Texas, Stuart? Not sure if Stuart Ramsey's hearing me. Let's catch up with David Bowden again. David, what are going to be the priorities? I mean, you're seeing all this aid and support now filing into Beaumont and coming off the boats. We've seen it going up the road past us towards you, police cars, flatbed trucks, pickup trucks, full of stuff. What are they going to need most in that area?
I think probably just a couple of clear days to get rid of the rubbish. I think that, as I said before, Rita has done a lot of damage, but it's largely superficial. There's not masses of structural damage, not masses of rebuilding to be done. Okay, the fronts of a few buildings have been peeled away and fallen off. A lot of slates have come off roofs, tiles, etc. And it's going to be a good time for the glaziers because there's many, many windows that have gone. But we haven't seen buildings collapsing on any great scale. We haven't seen lots of people trapped and injured. And we haven't seen, we go back to this time and time again, this huge surge of water in the wake of Rita, which would have breached the levees and which would have flooded hundreds and hundreds of square miles. That was the real problem. That was what they feared most. And thankfully for everybody, that hasn't happened. So now it's a matter of getting a couple of clear days to go around this city and other cities up and down the coast, not being hindered by having ordinary people, if you like, around to kind of get in the way, ask questions, be a draw on their time, and the emergency services can get about their job, get these places cleaned up so that when people do come back, at the end of the weekend perhaps, when they come back from their friends, relatives, hotels, up in the north of the counties and away from this area, then they're coming back to something that is up and running and pretty much close to 100%.
David, thanks very much for the update from Beaumont, and the good news appears to be that there don't seem to be a lot of human casualties in all this. An awful lot of damage done, an awful lot of flooding and problems no doubt for days and weeks ahead, but so far no great signs of casualties amongst the local population. Let us just remind you of the main stories this Saturday afternoon on Sky News. Hurricane Rita is losing power as it moves inland, and so are many of the residents around as a result. We're hearing now 1 million people may be without power in the wake of the storm. Hours of heavy rains have wreaked havoc right across Texas and Louisiana. Experts are now concerned about more flooding and storm surge waters heading inland. Parts of the already devastated city of New Orleans are underwater again. US Army engineers say there are no fresh leaks in the damaged levee system, but repair work will be set back at least 3 weeks now. And local authorities right across the region have asked people who've evacuated to stay where they are for the moment, stay put. Some are already heading home to try and assess the damage left behind by Rita. So it appears the worst of the storm is past. It's now 70 or 80 miles to the north of me here in eastern Texas. We're still feeling the afterdraft, the driving rains and the high winds, but it appears for the moment the worst is past. Now it's a matter of checking out how much damage Rita's done. It perhaps could have been worse. More from Texas in a while.
Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. Well, back home, delegates have been travelling to Brighton for the Labour Party conference. It begins tomorrow. Tony Blair arrived in the seaside town earlier this afternoon. Security is very tight, with police creating a secure island site around the conference centre. Sky's political correspondent John Craig is there. He joins us now live. And John, revitalising his own party, very much Mr Blair's mind.
Well, this conference is all about Mr Blair's legacy, really. Some people would like this to be his last conference as Labour leader and Prime Minister before handing over to Gordon Brown. Mr Blair arrived here with his red box in his hand as though he's still got plenty of work to do. Even John Prescott had a smile on his face this afternoon. Mr Prescott told me, it's a great day, let's celebrate, obviously referring to Labour's election victory back in May. But whilst Mr Prescott may be in a sunny mood to match the weather here, there are storm clouds in the form of the trade unions really, who really are out to make life uncomfortable for the Prime Minister here on a number of issues. First of all, the very controversial issue of public sector pension age. The government wants to move the retirement age for people in the public sector from 60 to 65. The unions are threatening trouble on that. Also, NHS reforms. The government denies it's more privatisation, but the unions don't like that. Secondary picketing as well. Then, of course, if you add to that, there's a row over what some critics claim is a move to gag a motion paying tribute to Robin Cook and his opposition to the war in Iraq. So I think, as ever, we're in for a fairly stormy conference here. It probably won't be Mr Blair's last as Labour leader. He's talking about handing over in 2007 or 2008. But we really are seeing the beginning of the end of the Blair premiership. Premiership now, and the argument is all about Mr Blair's legacy. He will say, don't throw it all away, don't abandon my new Labour agenda. If you do that, you'll hand power to the Tories at the next general election.
John, how overt is the criticism, the dissatisfaction with Mr Blair going to be? Will it be obvious, or do we expect things, as often in these cases, to be just behind the scenes and under the carpet as far as the surface is concerned?
No, it'll be obvious, Alan, because there are going to be debates on, for example, workers' rights. Also, a couple of weeks ago here in Brighton at the TUC, they passed an emergency motion on Gate Gourmet. Bring back secondary strike action, say the trade unions. Now, both Mr Blair and Gordon Brown, Labour's leader in waiting, have both said no to that. About 10 days ago, next door to where I'm standing now at the Grand Hotel, at the TUC General Council dinner, they almost choked on their salmon, mousse and chicken and bacon when the Prime Minister said no Labour government is ever going to return to 70s style trade union laws. I was talking to Derek Simpson from the big Amicus trade union this afternoon. He is demanding what he calls a level playing field. He wants those secondary picketing laws brought back. There'll be a clash on that. There will also be a clash on those public sector pensions. And of course, Iraq. There's a big demonstration taking place in London today. There's a big anti-war rally here tomorrow. Rest assured, there'll be plenty of criticism of the government out in the open, as well as all the plotting in the smoke-filled rooms, of course. Although I have to tell you, Alan, they've banned smoking in the conference hall this year. So the smoke-filled rooms will have to be in the bars and the hotels.
Excellent, or even better, outside. John, thanks very much indeed, John Craig there. Now let's cross back to Beaumont in Texas, one of the worst affected areas by Hurricane Rita. David Bowden, our correspondent, is there for us now. David, just bring us up to date with the latest from there, if you would.
Well, Alan, you may have heard me talking about these ships that were anchored just off the Gulf Coast to keep a lot of the emergency services clear of the worst of the hurricane. And we can see some of those just arriving here, a big line of fire tenders that up until now have been effectively stranded on that huge freighter. Let me tell you what happened. Because of the huge surge of water that follows the hurricane, these boats simply got too high in the water and couldn't get these huge fire tenders and everything else they had on there off to help the rescue effort. But as you can see here live now on Sky News, they are here and they will be going out. They're getting a briefing in the building behind me now to find out where they've got to go and what they've got to do. The good news, of course, is that there's probably not as much to do as there might have been. We think that there might have been a huge storm surge, that this whole area could have been underwater right now and hundreds of square miles elsewhere would have been flooded. But that didn't happen. The levees held, the storm surge wasn't as great, and the hurricane blew through. It was very windy, there was a lot of rain, there's a lot of superficial damage, trees down and the like, but everybody here is breathing a huge sigh of relief because, relatively speaking, they got away unscathed. So these guys who've just arrived might find there's not as much for them to do as they had feared.
David Bowden for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Now let's check all the sports news. Here's Chris.
Alan, thanks. Good afternoon again. Chelsea have made it 7 wins out of 7 in the Premiership, their best ever start to a league season, thanks to 2 goals from Frank Lampard in a 2-1 win against Aston Villa. They had to come from behind, though, to beat Villa, who led through a Luke Moore goal, the first Chelsea have conceded this season. But Chelsea were level within a minute thanks to a Frank Lampard free kick, and he made sure they got the points with a penalty towards the end. Chelsea 2, Villa 1.
Chelsea going a goal down and then scoring a second half.
They defend well, but they didn't come to defend. They come to play the game, and they gave us a very difficult game. I think we deserve to win because we dominated, and especially in the second half, we dominated a lot the situation until we scored the second goal. But they played well. They played well.
It was a shock at Old Trafford where Mark Hughes, Blackburn Rovers beat Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United 2-1. Rooney left on the bench for United today and it didn't pay off for them. Finished 2-1. Morten Gamst Pedersen, the Norwegian striker, there he has got both goals for Blackburn. They led 1-0. Van Nistelrooy equalised for United, but a goal 9 minutes from time from the Norwegian had them smiling. Finished Manchester United 1, Blackburn 2. United's first defeat of the campaign.
Firing home in the second half.
Arsene Wenger wasn't smiling really. A goalless draw for them at West Ham, who have now gone third. West Ham and Arsenal dropping points in pursuit of Chelsea. West Ham 0, Arsenal 0. Charlton another London club in the top 3. They held on to second place with their 5th win of the season. It came at the Hawthorns, 2-1 against West Brom. Danny Murphy got both of their goals, one of them from the penalty spot. 2-0 at half-time. West Brom pulled one back through Curtis Davis, but the Addicts held on to make it 5 wins and second place still in that Premiership table. And Michael Owen got his 2nd goal in successive games, his first at his new home ground, St James's Park, as Newcastle beat Manchester City by 1-0 and a 2nd straight win moves them up to 11th in the table. Going from bad to worse though for David Moyes' Everton, for whom Damien Francis, or for Wigan rather, Damien Francis getting the only goal to sink Everton at Goodison. And they stay 2nd from bottom after a very poor run of form. Their 4th defeat of the season, Everton 0. Wigan, the newcomers, now unbeaten in 5 matches, having lost their first 2. A terrific 1-0 win for them at struggling Everton. And Liverpool conceded their first goals of the season in the early kick-off at St Andrews, and it took a late penalty from Djibril Cissé to earn them a point in a 2-2 draw against Birmingham City.
Birmingham could have been ahead with their first chance. Former Liverpool striker Emil Heskey denied by Jose Reina. Liverpool responded. Skipper Steven Gerrard inches away. It remained goalless at half-time. Liverpool struck midway through the second half. Gerrard the provider for substitute Luis Garcia. Back came Birmingham and they were ahead within 7 minutes. First, Julian Gray's cross was diverted into his own net by Stephen Warnock. And when Reina failed to hold on to Heskey's header, Walter Pandiani was in the right place. The Uruguayan had been on the pitch for under 3 minutes. Then, late drama. Neil Kilkenny handled on the line as Liverpool pressed. The teenager was dismissed on his Premiership debut. And another sub, Djibril Cissé, equalised with the resultant penalty. Liverpool had the opportunity to win it at the end. Peter Crouch wasted it, and 2-2 it finished. Dharmesh, Sky News.
It was a good game to watch if you were a neutral, but we're going away bitterly disappointed. We came here for 3 points, disappointed to go away with 1.
Cautious first half. What did the manager say to you in the second half?
Yeah, we were doing okay first half. We were controlling the game, but we were creating too many clear-cut chances. Second half, we played a lot better, created a lot more, and I thought we deserved the 3 points.
It was entertaining to say the least. It was crazy, because I thought, I cannot remember my goalkeeper making a shot to save, and it's just erupted here. Nobody, I think, would have predicted at half-time that it would end up 2-2.
That's confirmation of the results today. There's one game we haven't told you about. That's because it's ongoing, about less than 15 minutes played at the Reebok. Bolton 0, Portsmouth 0 is the latest score in the first half. So for the time being, it looks like that. Chelsea keeping their 100% record, best ever start to a season. Charlton stays second, 6 points behind. West Ham up to third, United fourth. Chelsea are 10 points clear already of United and 11 ahead of Arsenal. Blackburn's win at Manchester United moves them up 5 places. Fulham replaced them in the bottom 3. They play Spurs on Monday. Everton and Sunderland, who play Borough tomorrow, occupy the other drop zone places at the time for the time being. And the Coca-Cola Championship today, Sheffield United made it another win to stay top. They beat Derby 2-1, goals from Unsworth and Paul Ifill. Reading in second, also winning 1-0 at Norwich with a James Harper goal. Watford third, they drew at Crewe. Other headline makers today, Sam Parkin got both goals for Ipswich in a 2-0 win at Leeds. A good win for Wolves at Stoke. Goals from Carl Court, Kenny Miller and Lee Naylor. And a late equaliser from Clinton Morrison for Crystal Palace at home to Preston. A big story in Scotland today in the SPL. Hearts kept their 100% record at the start of the season with the victory over Rangers. Just 1 goal settled it. It came after 14 minutes from Roman Bednar. The first time Hearts in their great start that they'd played one of the old firm, but they kept that unbeaten run going. 1-0 at Tynecastle through Bednar. Elsewhere, Celtic winning 2-1 against Inverness, both goals from Craig Beattie, and a good win for Hibs at Motherwell with goals from Buzela, Michael Stewart and Derek Reardon. Here's what it means for the top of the table then. Hearts 5 points clear of Celtic with that perfect record. 8 wins from 8 games, Hearts. Grimsby's reward for knocking out Spurs is a home tie against Newcastle in the Carling Cup third round, the draw for which was made live on Sky earlier today. There's the draw. Elsewhere, the other giant killers from last week, Doncaster and Gillingham, will play each other. Barnet will go to Manchester United. 1 or 2 all Premiership ties there. Crystal Palace only playing 1 tie despite two names there. Fulham West Brom is an all Premiership tie, as is Sunderland versus Arsenal and Everton versus Middlesbrough. Now racing, the Luca Kamani trained Starcraft has won the Group 1 Queen Elizabeth II Stakes at Newmarket, ridden by Christophe Lemaire in the red, white and blue colours. The 72 shot travelled well throughout on the near side rail, and too good for Frankie Dettori's Mount Dubarwi, and holding on to win. Beat the 6-4 favourite, with the second string Godolphin trained Blatant finishing third at 100-1. And Ouija Board showed her class as the champion filly in her comeback run after being injured back in June, ridden by Frankie Dettori in the black, last year's English and Irish Oaks winner. Hit the front 3 out and stayed there to beat Briolette by 2.5 lengths. Book is impressed too. She's now the 5-4 favourite to win the Breeders' Cup fillies and mares in the States coming up. And the John Gosden trained Nanina won the fillies mile in an exciting finish, ridden by Jimmy Fortune in the red and white. She got up to beat the Aidan O'Brien trained Alexandrova by a head, and the 5-2 favourite Nasheed was third. Gloucester's unbeaten run in the Guinness Premiership continues. The Kingsholm side were trailing for much of the match against Northampton, but halfway through the second half, James Simpson's Daniels interception helped push them to victory all the way to the line from there, and they won it by 28 points to 24. In the day's other game, our London Irish beat Bristol, Paul Hodgson getting both their tries in a narrow victory. Great Britain and Ireland are down in all 4 of the afternoon foursomes matches on day 3 of the Seve Trophy, but they had the better of the morning greensomes and levelled the match at 7 points all. Porrick Harrington and Paul McGinley picked up the first point of the day by beating Thomas Levey and Jose Maria Olazabal by 3 and 2, but not looking so good for the British and Irish in the afternoon foursomes. A day for British tennis. Great Britain have lost their Davis Cup tie against Switzerland. Lost the 2 opening singles rubbers yesterday, and it was confirmed today in the doubles. Rosetsky and Murray going down to Roger Federer and Yves Allegro by 3-1. It means the British team face a quick return to the Euro Africa zone early next year, while the Swiss will go on back to the World Group. Warrington and Hull meet later on in the second game of the Super League playoffs. The winners will meet Bradford next weekend. The Bulls eliminated Bradford last night with a 44-22 victory. Now, new type of motorsport today. Nelson Piquet Jr. is on pole for the A1 Grand Prix tomorrow, first of it. Let's go to Brands Hatch, where Sky's Enda Brady's been watching the first qualifying session, and I gather it was pretty exciting for the fans, and a very familiar name there at the top of the grid tomorrow.
It was, Chris, very enjoyable day, very entertaining, lots to see here. Have to say, it's quite surprising. It's 19 years since a Grand Prix was held at Brands Hatch. Remember, back then it was F1. Today it was all about A1, the A1 Grand Prix of Nations, a whole new concept in world motorsport. 25 countries racing against each other in identical cars with identical engines. So it's all about the driver, and really one man everyone's talking about here this evening is Nelson Piquet Jr. A common thread running back to 1986, because in that British Grand Prix F1 race back then 19 years ago, his father Nelson Piquet was on pole. Well, after a stunning performance here today from the young Brazilian, he too will be in pole position tomorrow when the inaugural A1 GP gets underway. New Zealand are in second place, the French are in third, the Australians are in fourth, and Robbie Kerr from Team GB is in fifth place. He'll probably be a little bit disappointed with his performance today, but Robbie Kerr has enough about him to get out here tomorrow and give Piquet a run for his money. But a very, very interesting day here at Brands Hatch, and motorsport fans saying that this really is a breath of fresh air, something new, something different, and something they've been waiting a long time to see.
Okay, Enda will join again later. Thanks very much indeed for that. So Nelson Piquet Jr., very familiar Former F1 name, of course, on pole for that A1 Grand Prix tomorrow. The main headline today, Chelsea 7 straight wins after beating Aston Villa 2-1. More to come on that later on.
Still to come here on Live at 5, Bring Our Boys Home. Thousands of anti-war protesters gather in central London.
British Airways' biggest ever sale ends midnight Tuesday. For these and many more destinations, book now at ba.com.
Hello, are you losing sleep over your finances? Well, you don't have to go to the bank for a low-cost loan. Why not see if it's easier, faster and cheaper to call Lombard Direct on 0800 2 15,000.
Your rate is based on your circumstances and loan amount. Our typical rate is just 6.4% APR.
For an unsecured personal loan of up to £25,000, call Lombard Direct on 0800 2 15,000 or apply online at lombarddirect.com.
4-in-1 is the first dishwasher tab from Finish to combine a powerful detergent, salt, rinse aid and glass protector action all in one tab. This gives you the 10 power actions essential for truly brilliant results, time after time. Finish 4-in-1. One tab, 10 power actions.
Hi, I'm from elephant.co.uk and today I'm talking to drivers about their car insurance. So what do you want from your car insurance?
Well, dear, I want it cheap. Cheap!
Yes! Well, certainly! With elephant.co.uk you can get a quote direct online in minutes, which means lower costs, which means you can pay less for your car insurance. Relax. Elephant.co.uk really could save you money on your car insurance. It's easy, it's fast. It's elephant.co.uk.
More of the day's other news now, and thousands of people have gathered in London and Washington to demand the withdrawal of coalition troops from Iraq. Supporters of the Stop the War coalition say the arrest of 2 British soldiers in Basra this week has highlighted the urgent need to bring troops home. Sky's Mark White reports now from the London March.
In the shadow of Westminster, the sights and sounds of thousands angered by the continued coalition presence in Iraq. An army of occupation, they say, which is doing more harm than good.
I will defend the right of anybody here to speak.
Recent legislation means it's now illegal to use a megaphone outside Parliament, but Peter Brierley, whose son died while serving in Iraq, was determined to defy that ban and to take part in the march.
Just listen to people stood behind us. That he can't fit. Tony Blair can't fail to notice this.
No longer marching to the tune of the military, George Solomu is now a protester, a soldier who defied a call-up to serve in Iraq. It was, he maintains, the right thing to do.
No regrets. I miss my friends dearly and I wish I could be one day with them again, but no, if it can save lives, I'm willing to take the consequences.
Passing the gates of Downing Street, the ranks of these protesters have swollen by many thousands. This, they say, is a powerful message to the Prime Minister to bring British troops home now. The events in the southern Iraqi city of Basra earlier this week, when British soldiers were forced to flee an angry mob, has given anti-war protesters added momentum. One Iraqi doctor who addressed the marchers as they arrived in Hyde Park said he would rather see the return of Saddam Hussein than the continued presence of British and US troops.
If you ask me now, if I return back 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I would prefer to return back 3 years ago, what I am seeing every day from bombing limbs, heads every day in streets of Baghdad.
Although well short of the 100,000 they'd hoped for, organisers of this demonstration still believe it sends a strong message to Labour delegates gathering for their annual conference in Brighton. But the Prime Minister maintains British troops must stay in Iraq until their job is done. And that could be measured in years rather than months. Mark White, Sky News, Central London.
Politicians are also split over whether troops should stay in Iraq or withdraw. It's an issue which is bound to feature in this week's Labour Party conference. We're joined from Brighton now by the Labour MEP Michael Cashman and from Central London by Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn. A very good evening to both of you. Jeremy Corbyn, if I could ask you first of all, putting aside, if we may, the rights and wrongs of going into Iraq in the first place, the coalition is there. Wouldn't it be irresponsible simply to withdraw now?
No, I don't think so, because it seems that, to me, the presence of the coalition forces is more of the problem than the solution. Look at what happened in Fallujah, look at what happened this week in Basra, and just look at the political makeup of Iraq. The majority of people in the Iraq National Assembly, the majority of all the political parties in Iraq all want the coalition forces to withdraw. I think the justification of them being there, if there ever was one, is long gone, and the idea of bringing about peace and stability, we are in fact the subject of most of the attacks.
Michael Cashman, I know you're in favour of keeping the troops there for the time being at least, but what Jeremy Corbyn says surely is very valid, that if they are exacerbating the situation on the ground, better to have them out.
We're there, we've got to establish the rule of law. I think anything else would create huge instability, not only within Iraq, but across the entire region. We've got a job to do, and to back off now would be an absolute betrayal of the Iraqi people and of those men and women who are fighting there on our behalf to establish the rule of law and democracy, and an act of betrayal to actually those soldiers and those men and women who've already given their lives. Anyone who thought this was easy was living in dreamland. It's extremely hard, but if we pull out now, then we encourage fundamentalists wherever they may be.
But isn't it a terrible arrogance for Britain to be saying we are the ones who will be in this foreign land, occupying your country, establishing the rule of law?
Well, you could have actually said that during the Second World War, when initially the Second World War had nothing whatsoever to do with us. That which happens in another part of the world does affect us. And if you don't stand up and fight against it, then eventually you will be threatened and challenged by it. But we committed ourselves to Iraq. Having committed ourselves, we have to get the job done. And anything else, honestly, I believe, is a total act of betrayal.
Jeremy Corbyn, it's a very valid point, isn't it? Whether we should have committed ourselves or not, we did commit ourselves, and as Michael Cashman says, is it not right that the rule of law is established, the country is put back on its feet before we, in the words of John Reid, cut and run?
Well, Michael, I ought to think about this a little. We broke the rule of law to go into Iraq. We told dishonest arguments to try and get people to support the war in Iraq. 100,000 people have died in Iraq. And what's it for? Huge profits for Halliburton and other corporations. It's about oil. Surely we should be saying instead it's time for us to get out of Iraq so that the Iraqi people can decide their own future. There were no terrorists in Iraq until George Bush claimed that there were, and therefore there had to be a war against Iraq. We've actually made the world more dangerous and less safe because of our policies there. The idea that we're there to sort out the problem strikes me as a sort of colonial mentality belonging more to the 19th and 20th centuries than to what should be legal, just solutions to the problems of the 21st century.
Surely there is a fundamental problem there with what you say, and that is that you can't simply go, can you, and leave the Iraqi people to sort out their own country, because the Iraqi people are also at the hands of insurgents, others from overseas who would destabilize their country.
We have to set a date by which we go, and indeed the current policy would end by December. I think we should recognise there are significant groups within the Iraqi National Assembly that are talking to a whole myriad of different organisations, probably including representatives of the insurgents. Indeed, Rumsfeld himself said they'd been talking to the insurgents. There has to be a political solution and a political way out. I'm old enough to remember exactly the same arguments being used by the Americans in Vietnam, saying we couldn't leave because the place would descend into chaos. Eventually they had to leave in great humiliation in 1976. I would rather we left Iraq and saved lives rather than stayed there on what is going to cost an awful lot of American, British and Iraqi lives the longer this conflict goes on.
Final question, if I may, to Michael Cashman. I actually held back from using the word colonialism, which Robin Corbyn used there. But that is, isn't it, how this is being perceived? That is the whole problem, that Britain looks like an arrogant imperialist power.
People may say that that's what it looks like, but we're not colonising, and neither the Americans are colonising Iraq. We are there to see through what we've begun, which is to restore democracy, to give Iraq back to the Iraqi people. And actually, I think if we remember those people, those hundreds of thousands, those millions of people who queued to vote for the first time in over 50 years, that was miraculous. If we can spread that further throughout the Middle East and to other countries, then if that's what they call colonialism, then I don't think it's such a bad thing. Democracy is what we need to restore. Restore democracy, the rule of law, and then we get out. We want to hand the country back to the Iraqis, but we have to finish the job. Anything else, as I said before, is an act of absolute betrayal.
Gentlemen, we very much appreciate your time and your views. Michael Cashman and Jeremy Corbyn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring you up to date with the very latest on Hurricane Rita here in East Texas, where the wind is still blowing. The rains have abated a little bit, but they've chucked down quite a number of inches in the last few hours, and that's creating flooding across parts of eastern Texas here. So if you've just want to know what's been happening on the storm front, let's bring you the latest top stories on Hurricane Rita. And it is now losing power as it moves inland, but so are many of the residents here. It's believed that 1 million people could now be without power around here. Hours of heavy rains have wreaked havoc across Texas and Louisiana. Experts are now concerned about flooding and surge waters. Parts of the already devastated city of New Orleans are underwater again. US Army engineers say there are no fresh leaks in the damaged levee system, but repair work could be set back by at least 3 weeks. Local authorities have asked people who evacuated the region to stay where they are, but some are already heading home to assess the damage left behind by Rita. Well, as you join us here in eastern Texas, just remind you that about 2.8 million people evacuated this region around coastal Texas, but one of those who didn't is Larry Bucks-Kemper, who joins me now. Larry, good to see you, and your dog Dingo as well. Why did you not move out? Why did you decide to stay at home?
Well, I'm a wise old bird. I've been through 4 of them when I was a kid. Carla, Alicia, and this one. I was waiting for it to kick north. It was going west. You didn't know where to go, east or west. So I was waiting for it to kick. When it kicked northeast, I went west. The place I went was the Best Western in Brownsville.
So you've seen it all before, Larry, and you thought this storm's not going to get me this time.
Yeah, I didn't, but it finally got me. The storm wasn't that bad. The wind here, but it knocked the electricity out and air conditioning. My wife is a heart patient. She needs air conditioning, so that's the reason I'm here. Because my wife needs air conditioning, and it got me. Rita got me too. Yes, sir. That's right.
I mean, listening to that storm howling round last night, it's like an express train going through town, isn't it? Doesn't it scare you every time?
Not on this side. See, we didn't have but about 70 miles an hour here. I've been through 150 miles an hour in Carla and Victoria, where the eye just missed. So. And our electricity around us, it's spotty. Electricity is still around us, but it caught me. It knocked our electricity out in our little townhouse. So that's it. Rita got me. I got to evacuate too, like everybody else.
So a lot of your neighbors around your area must have got out of town, did they?
I would say in our townhouse of 100 people, 75%. Only the old timers, the wise old birds, are going to fool Rita.
Where did they all go?
We did, because we saw it kicking north. We knew it wasn't. I knew it. It was kicking north and going, but it would be. The chances were, would it knock out the electricity? I took that chance and I lost. Rita knocked out my electricity, and I got to go.
So all your neighbours, 75% of your neighbours left. Where did they head to?
Yeah, north. A lot of them went north to Dallas, to Conroe. The people locally around here, Lufkin, they all went north because they had relatives in that there. In Dallas, Lufkin north. San Antonio was all full up from Katrina. I would say they all went north.
It's been a bad storm season, hasn't it, really?
Oh, yes. Yeah, this.
Did you think this could be worse? Did you think Rita might hit you worse than this?
Yeah, because they kept talking, it was like Carla. I think really, of course, I was in it, so I think it's bigger. But this was, they kept saying, Carla, it's going to be big, and this is big, but it calmed down a little at the end. Carla was 200 miles per hour, and when he hit Victoria, 150. See, this went down to Category 3, where Camille and Carla was Category 5.
They kept on coming.
Okay, Carla. They miss this story all the time. Carla came out here, and Carla stopped right off the Texas shore for 3 days. I was there. You can check that. And it stopped 3 days, and Carla blasted destroyed Port O'Connor completely. I went down to Port O'Connor after this was all over. Everything was knocked down, and it makes a believer out of you. The only thing standing in Port O'Connor was the old Catholic church. And what happened, probably the water got above the old church before the wall hit it. Okay.
Good stuff. And Dingo seems to have survived pretty well. So your dog's obviously not too troubled by the storms either then.
Well,
Harry.
This is his first hurricane, and he liked the wind. As soon as it started howling, he ran in the house up to my wife up in the top of the townhouse. He got scared in his first hurricane and went upstairs.
I don't blame him at all. Larry Bucks-Kemper, thank you very much for talking to us. Glad you survived the storm. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Nice to see you and Dingo.
Yes, okay, thank you. Bye.
Let's catch up with some new pictures we've just got in. Of course, a lot of people actually chased the storm. There are a lot of people who professionally or almost full-time amateurs chase storms, get pictures of them, try and assess the strength of these storms. These are some pictures that we've just got in at Skye. You'll see a lot of dramatic electrical flashes. We've noticed those all the way through the night. We thought at first it was lightning, but you don't tend to get a lot of lightning around hurricanes. What you do get is the flashes of transformer units blowing out, basically shorting out in the rain and the winds, and that's why so many people are without power. So the flashes you see, and you'll see it's a bit like that film Twister, lots of bits in the air flying around. Anything that's not tied down, nailed down or battened down tends to get picked up and swept around in eddies and currents of wind that just rip everything that's not that's free, just rip it loose. And that's all